Going back to a story now that's proven exceptionally difficult to cover, the conflict in Ethiopia between rebel forces led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, and federal troops under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Just over a year ago, when the fighting broke out in Tigray, Abiy's government shut down the internet, cut telecommunications, barred journalists from the conflict zone, a near total blackout that is still mostly in place. News, like nature, abhors a vacuum. And one byproduct of the blackout is that online activists on both sides have been filling the gap, sometimes shaping the news coverage. But activists are not journalists. Many of them have agendas that can sully the information that they provide. The Listening Post's Nick Muirhead now on the conflict in Tigray and the activism that, for better or worse, is driving the coverage of the story and the terminology.
It's October 2020, 1 month before the fighting began in Ethiopia, and Facebook is the country's dominant social media platform. Then, the TPLF attack the Federal Forces Northern Command in Tigray. A media blackout is imposed on the region, and something curious happens. Internet usage, patterns of online behavior in the rest of the country begin to change. Facebook's share of internet traffic drops from 66% to 40%. Twitter climbs from less than 6% to 44%. It was no accident, no mere market-driven shift. It was activism.
Almost immediately, within a week, we saw a massive uptick in the number of new Twitter accounts that were registered and that were tweeting almost exclusively about the conflict in Tigray. A lot of these were sort of coalescing around different hashtag campaigns that were established by very young Tigrayan activists in the diaspora.
When you look back at the hashtags and all the mobilizations on a global scale, one can certainly deduce that there was pre-planning in starting a global campaign against the federal government and an effort to control the narrative.
We knew war was looming because we have seen and heard the rhetoric that was being pushed by the Ethiopian government, but we didn't know that it was going to be this brutal.
Gldey Gebremedhin is a Tigrayan activist living in the diaspora, amplifying hashtags about the conflict, helping those issues make the jump from social media into the mainstream. Like the government's involvement of Eritrean troops in the conflict.
First of all, we would like to see a strict deadline as to when the Eritrean troops and the Amhara militias are supposed to withdraw from Tigray.
The alleged use of mass rape as a weapon of war.
Whereby women are also being gang raped by military men from the Ethiopian National Army as well as the Amhara militia in Eritrea.
And how inflammatory news coverage in the country is fueling ethnic cleansing.
It is this kind of reckless comments and rhetoric that are actually resulting in the massacre in the days of our people.
Gebremedhin doesn't work alone. She and fellow activists set up an organization called Omna Tigray, which uses what Gebremedhin calls an educated form of advocacy to get the world to pay attention to what is happening in Tigray.
What that means is we prepare pre-made tweets, we prepare panel discussions, we write articles and monthly or regular reports. That's how we try to push the issue of the Tigray genocide to the international community, so that they don't continue to be confused by the propaganda that comes from the Ethiopian government and its allies.
That word Gebremedhin used, genocide, it's a loaded term, one that can have implications both politically and militarily. According to the 1948 Genocide Convention, once the UN declares a genocide, then member states are required to intervene, which hasn't happened in this case. The UN has said that the conflict has been marked by extreme brutality on both sides, but it stopped short at declaring a genocide. That hasn't prevented the term from being used on social media. And if you scroll down Gebremedhin's Twitter feed, you'll see the hashtag Tigray genocide being used repeatedly, and all the way back to November 9th, 2020, starting just 4 days after the TPLF launched its attack.
Yes, I am one of the people who used the hashtag Tigray genocide early on. And that's primarily because genocide is a crime of intent. Before November 4th, we know what kind of rhetoric was being pushed by the Ethiopian government and its affiliated media outlets. We know the Ethiopian government was actively working towards dehumanizing the people of Tigray, towards othering them within the Ethiopian community. So The genocidal intent is right there.
The Tigrai genocide hashtag was used by many campaigns to raise awareness about their interpretation of events. And that hashtag has been really controversial because the government says that the existence of this hashtag is evidence of a disinformation campaign because they don't agree that there's a genocide going on.
The attention on a global scale that the TPLF activities were able to get at the time have helped them control the narrative on Western media.
US Congressman Brad Sherman recently tweeted, "What's unfolding in Ethiopia has all the makings of a genocide."
Because you can see that especially the Tigrayan genocide and hashtags like that have attracted wider Western media attention than anything.
But a counter-campaign was on the way. In November 2021, a new hashtag called No More started trending. The organizers of this campaign say that they are out to set the record straight.
In November, we say hashtag no more. No more false narratives that support killers versus victims. No more media lies.
Claire Wilmot is a researcher with the London School of Economics and has been tracking the various hashtags associated with this conflict. Wilmot says that the data pattern of the No More campaign represents a significant departure from what we've seen before.
What we see now is a much more professional and much more centralized effort to promote this hashtag. I think it was in early November. The highest number of tweets that the No More campaign produced on a single day surpassed 500,000. The highest number that we've tracked from the Tigrayan campaigns has been about 200,000. So it's a significant change in terms of this kind of campaign.
These are paid activists, these paid professionals. Some of them are self-proclaimed journalists. They're trying to create false equivalence between those at the receiving of the genocide and those who are perpetrating the genocide.
The No More campaign was launched by Hamela Aragawi, an Ethiopian, and Simon Tesfamariam, an Eritrean, both of whom are based in the US. We gave them the opportunity to respond to the allegation that they are backed by the Ethiopian government. We even booked an interview with Aragawi, but on the day of filming she cancelled. We then made several attempts to reschedule that interview, but Aragawi stopped replying to our messages. We did, however, speak with Ebebe Gldey, an Ethiopian journalist who went into exile in the US when the TPLF led the national government in Addis Ababa. A reign lasting nearly 3 decades that was marred with oppression, mass incarceration and censorship. While Gldey says that he is not affiliated with the No More campaign, he does use the hashtag and puts its popularity down to genuine support among Ethiopians at home and in the diaspora who have grown tired of what they call the misreporting of this story.
We need to see a more truthful approach, a more balanced approach rather than echoing the propaganda by one side, especially the TPLF, like genocide and the other key terms that they have been pushing out with massive Twitter campaign. Where does the information come about genocide and things like that? Highly biased, anonymous sources. You cannot report a story, a highly sensitive story like genocide, based on bias. So that's why I also support a movement which says no more propaganda, no more lies.
Or how about no more media blackout? In the 15 months since the fighting began, the government has only granted the international media one 3-month-long window of access to Tigray, when federal forces were in control of the region's capital, Mekelle. That ended 8 months ago. Removing mainstream news sources from the conflict has left the information space up for grabs, resulting in a social media war of words and terminology.
It's crucial that the government allows for more voices to be weighing in. They've tried so hard to constrain access, and it's not worked in anyone's favor, including their own, because they're basically asking people to just accept them at their word.
Ordinary global citizens do not really know who to believe and who to trust, so it's very critical that journalists are allowed to access Tigray. One, in order to make sure that this genocidal war is documented properly. Two, to make sure that perpetrators of the crime are held accountable.
To this day, no one can say for certain if what is taking place in the region of Tigray amounts to a genocide, but the red flags are there. The growing evidence that shows that the real victims of this war are the innocent civilians caught in the middle. and journalists must find a way to tell their stories, whether the authorities let them in or not.